met a homeless man on the street. He passed away in a warehouse fire that was deliberately lit.
I was raped.
Abused by these two grossly inoffensive staff members, discrimination and vilification towards people with disabilities.
The record is falsified, evidence is removed.
It was a betrayal, it was an injustice of social equality, it was an injustice of gender equality, it was just an injustice of everything.
Hello and welcome to the Injustice series. I'm your host Janelle De Silva, and joining us today are three guests: Jeff from We Are Change, Shanae and Lorinda. Are you right if I do that again? Because I said this morning.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Today? Hello and welcome to the Injustice series. My name is Janelle De Silva, I'm your host today, and joining us is Jeff from We Are Change, Shanae and Lorinda. Hello and welcome.
Thanks for having me back.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's all of our pleasure. Lorinda, tell us what has brought you here today to share your story of injustice.
Relationships are complicated, a true mix of joy, frustration, elation, and occasionally pain. For better or worse, partners should be there to help each other through it all. But when we place that trust and love in the callous hands of an abuser, it can be more than just the heart that aches. Today, Lorinda is here to speak about her own history of abuse and her empowering rise from trauma in the wake of an abuser's rage.
A couple of years ago, I was verbally abused and controlled by my ex-boyfriend. It started off okay, then all of a sudden he changed, he controlled everything I did. He threatened me on a continuous basis, he threatened my dog every day, like he would ask me where I was going, who I was seeing. He wasn't happy with my job. I wasn't earning as much as him, but I was still working full time. He wanted me to either get a second job and work 12 hours a day, or he wanted me to get a new job and work and at least get $50,000 a year. He wouldn't call me or text me, regardless of him being very close to where I was living, but he would email me because he said it cost too much money, but he would fully expect me to call and text him. I broke up with him because I wasn't happy with how he was treating me. A couple of weeks later, he said he was sorry and that he would change, and I believed him. And straight away, I believed it was a big mistake to take him back because it got worse. I actually ended up living with him for about 2 months because his family went away on a cruise, so I moved in for 2 months. Basically, the main reason was they had a dog that had seizures and had a daily tablet, and he wouldn't give it to the dog, so he said, if you don't stay, I'll tell my family that you never gave it to him and that's why the dog's dead. So I lived with him for 2 months. Quickly I had to do all the cooking, all the cleaning. I wasn't really allowed to see my friends. He wanted to take my debit card to control my spending, and the night before I left, it was the day his family came back. He had me in a corner threatening to hit me if I didn't obey his rules. So while he was at work, because I got home before him, I packed up everything and I left. He basically told his family that I left him for somebody else and that I was cheating on him, and his whole family just hate me, and they believe that was the reason to why we broke up. And the injustice I feel is that he could be doing it to other women. I really feel betrayed. Even though he didn't get around to hitting me, he was still an abusive relationship. It took me a while to actually see it because I didn't see it at the time because as well he said, you deserve this, it's your fault, this is happening, it's all normal. It still affects me to this day because I still get really anxious. When I did start dating again, I immediately thought that the same thing would happen. I would ask my new boyfriend at the time for permission to do everything, and he said, why are you asking permission? Do whatever you want. And I told him what had happened. And he insisted I go and speak to someone because I was having anxiety attacks, I was crying a lot, and I was really scared. I really hope one day his true colours will come out and that people will find out the kind of person he is, and that it might actually save another girlfriend that he might currently have.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Lorinda, tell me, after the fact is when you started to receive support. What support networks did you look into?
A lot of friends as well. I went and saw a psychologist just to sort of explain what was happening and try and get different sort of support groups. And I found some online forums about women had gone through a similar experience to me, and just kind of speaking, it could even be anonymous, just to actually get that support, people that had gone through the same thing, just so they know how I felt, and we can also support each other. But what did you do to get out of that? What did you do to feel better and move on?
What did you find once you joined those support groups when you found out, when you heard that your story wasn't just the only story?
Well, I quickly believed that, I was manipulated to believe that what I was experiencing was normal, but it actually wasn't. That's one thing I did learn quite quickly.
Unfortunately, domestic violence is one of our most silent and consistent crimes in this country, and it's an absolute atrocity that is going on every day. Lorinda, what would you say now to your former self if you had the chance to speak to yourself when you were in that relationship? What would you say?
That you should have got out earlier, and that you shouldn't have taken him back. I also would also tell myself that what you're experiencing, you did not deserve that, and it wasn't normal. But you are your own person. You were doing great at that time, and even though I was feeling really bad now, I was going to be a lot happier in the long run.
So can you tell me, apart from your own personal development, which obviously has come from you actively seeking support, can you tell me of any particular resource that has assisted you in your healing and your health and well-being?
I guess it's just more talking about it. I have a habit of just keeping things bottling up in my mind, and I kind of just explode by crying. But I just found that just talking to people, and just when you speak about it, you just feel so much better not having that burden sitting inside your chest.
Your story is so important, and I feel on behalf of all Australians, but particularly women, thank you for coming forward, and you're not alone.
You're welcome. Yeah.
And your strength and your courage is something that I hope every woman can relate and take from today, and also all of our male viewers and non-binary viewers can take from today and draw strength from your courage to grow through this, actively seek help and speak out with injustice today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sinead, tell us what brings you here today.
The pain and scars of violence have a tendency to remain as open wounds well into adulthood. Sinead begins her tale by outlining her father's and uncle's encounter with abuse, where the system left justice unserved and left them and their loved ones ill-equipped to handle life beyond the hurt. Today she carries the weight of decades-old atrocities and speaks out in the hope of inspiring other survivors to stay strong and to help each other.
So back in the 80s, when my father was really young, him and his brother were both sexually abused by their family doctor. Now they were too afraid and too embarrassed to tell anyone to seek any help, and a few years later they turned to drugs and alcohol to escape their emotions, the trauma that they were suffering. They finally spoke up and it went to court. However, the doctor didn't suffer any consequences, which I believe is just absolutely wrong and just disgusting. He was still allowed to practice. My father and uncle were deeply traumatised by what had happened to them, and they ended up actually committing suicide. They couldn't deal with the pain any longer, and at the age of 28, and I was just 4 years old, my father left the house telling my mum and I how much he loved us, and he went for a drive. He drove to the top of Knox City car park and parked his car. Whilst under the influence of drugs and alcohol, he attempted to gas himself. He had done this several times beforehand, so this time he thought the same thing would happen. He'd get help. He wasn't actually trying to kill himself. However, this time was different. He was in a coma for a month, and that's when my grandparents decided to turn the switches off, because he would have been a vegetable for life, wouldn't have been able to live life at all, and that's just no way for a person. About 6 months later, my uncle who was just my father's best friend. They were partners in crime. They did everything together. They were so close. He decided that he couldn't live any longer without my father, and he then did the same thing. So he went out for a drive, parked his car, did the exact same thing, only he died instantly. I was 5 at the time, so I don't have a lot of memories of my uncle. There are only 2 memories that I have, and there are just vague memories that I have of my father, which has been very, very hard on me, and trying to get to know the people that they were. It wasn't until I was 14 that I actually found out how my father and uncle died. For years I was just told that they were both really sick and got sicker when they were older and passed away. The reason being, you know, my family didn't know how to tell me, they didn't know how I would react, and I actually spiraled out of control as I was dealing with many other issues at the time. It was just too much for me, and I actually ended up self-harming and becoming destructive. Drinking out of control. I was going to school drunk, I was missing school. I had a lot of moments where I just thought I couldn't do it anymore. I just did everything I could to escape the pain. And I told myself, I'm never going to attempt suicide because of my father and my uncle. I don't want to do that. But when you're in that mindset, you just don't think of how it's going to affect other people. Like, you just want this to stop some way and you don't know how else to stop it. So it was just horrible. And then experiencing sexual abuse myself, I could relate. I just want to basically say to everyone out there that there is help, and don't be afraid to speak up. There's always someone that can help you. There's different support services. Speak to a friend, speak to someone. You know, I actually met someone on the street. I was having a breakdown and I went for a walk. I met this lovely lady who just stopped and asked if I was okay. She offered me to come back to her house for a cup of tea. It was an amazing feeling knowing that someone could actually relate, because she's been through a lot herself, and it was crazy. It's really good knowing that there are people out there that can relate. Not that it's a good thing for people to go through these things, but just knowing that they can understand what you're going through and you can help each other. I've gone to multiple counsellors, sexual assault counsellors, psychologists, all that. I've had experiences where they just tell me what to do and they don't listen, and I've had really good experiences where they've actually helped. What's actually really tough is the money for the counselling. It should be free. I'm really struggling trying to find someone out there to talk to. But I also have joined Facebook groups, and I'm in the run to basically become an admin for a sexual abuse and domestic violence group with all people from all around the world. I've been on that every day, hearing other people's stories, giving them advice, giving them my understanding and my story as well, relating to them.
Shanae, it's such an honour to have you here to represent not only your own strength and courage, but the fact that you're here to represent your family and your family's pain. You've brought so much to the table today. You know, firstly highlighting the intergenerational pain that's passed through abuse, particularly through the system, the fact that justice wasn't brought to light through the court system, and that essentially the system failed your father and your uncle. Can you tell me, Shanae, how justice could or should have been served?
So he should have been locked away. He should have suffered some consequences, if not, you know, locked up, at least having his job taken away, because his job is a privilege to him, which I don't believe he deserves.
Thank you. If there's any professional within the medical or legal system, anyone in the system that would like to come to Injustice and speak to us, not only in response to what Shanae or Lorinda has brought up already today, but we really welcome the community to join us and speak from the other side as well. I just really want to acknowledge your strength and capacity.
It feels good to just put it out there. It's easier talking about it than bottling it up.
Absolutely. Breaking the silence together. Thank you. Jeff, welcome back.
Abuse is not always a direct form of aggression and can often occur in other forms of neglect. The result can also lead to other issues such as homelessness, medical costs, and the inability to attend work, school, and other essential activities. In these situations, any offer of help or a solution to abuse of any kind are appreciated. Sometimes this can be found by offering support and consideration for those being abused. Injustice is humbled to welcome back Jeff to the show again, who speaks for many who have encountered abuse and serious issues. Today he discusses an old age topic about certain issues within rental properties.
While hosting the We Are Change talk show, I received a phone call from a woman in Western Australia who moved into a housing commission house that was found to have 8 out of 10 of the most toxic moulds known to mankind. This house was not assessed before she moved in, and she was struck down with aspergillosis type symptoms. Not just herself, but her son as well, and then he was unable to complete his final end of year exams at his school. So this has had a significant effect, very detrimental on their livelihood, and now they are both living in a caravan on a vacant block of land. So proper methods weren't used to test for mould, and the landlord simply said, clean the mould off yourself, scrub it off with vinegar, and to request that she clean that off herself is really out of the question.
Jeff, when you receive a call like you do through We Are Change, what do you want We Are Change to do for your callers? And in this case, how do you think We Are Change can help her?
Well, in this case, many listeners, I'd assume, were not well adversed when it comes to testing for mould. When it comes to the listeners, mould, it really brought that to the forefront, and then they were able to not only look at the dangers that toxic mould poses to one's health, but they can look and check their own house for water damaged areas, condensation, and have that assessed so they don't get struck down like this particular caller.
As a representative of We Are Change, how else can justice be served from the system?
Well, thorough methods need to be put in place before people move into houses that are not viable for them to be living in. That place should have been condemned. She had over $8,000 worth of belongings that were ruined because of the mould. And when she sought attention from a medical health professional, they were not trained in noticing symptoms related to mould, so then she was labelled as a hypochondriac. And, for somebody that's already suffering, that's an added level of stress that they should not have to deal with.
Absolutely.
So multiple complaints were made to Homes West in regards to this, and she has not found any resolution, unfortunately.
Jeff, how many callers do you have in response to stories like this? Have you found that the housing issues are constant with We Are Change?
There is numerous calls, a myriad of different problems and corruption that people have experienced. I get a lot of comments from people showing empathy to what she is going through, even people that have been suffering that from themselves. They know firsthand just how dangerous the mould is. So that provides a union and a community for not only the caller, but people that have suffered as well, to share their stories, and that is comforting to know that somebody else has been in that same predicament and they can share skills and what they went through to overcome that.
So Jeff, to reinforce for all of our viewers today about what can be done, how can We Are Change assist people?
Well, we provided a list of associated symptoms that stem from mould, so people can look at that. We provide ways of dealing with similar situations. In this case, I recommended she file a notice to remedy breach form. So then an investigation will be imminent and this will be addressed. But to ask a tenant to address these serious issues, there should be OH&S rules that apply. And that's going to increase her health issues tenfold. And she was bedridden, she's been admitted to hospital, as well as her son.
I'm thinking about myself and all the rental properties I've lived in over my life, particularly in my 20s. But I'm thinking also about all the different legislations in each state and how the renters are protected and renters' rights. It would be great if we could have anyone from the other side of the system to come forward and sit with us so they can talk to us and maybe share some information and different resources for tenants to be able to access more support. And I'm just thinking also about her young son.
That's right.
And how it's affected his studies.
His HSC was over. He couldn't complete that, and that's going to affect his life permanently.
An interesting thing that I've heard from all three of your stories today is about the psychological effects of the injustices that you've experienced. And what I'm hearing is that you've taken your well-being into your own hands. I'm curious about what is out there, what's accessible for people to maintain their psychological health. Would you be able to suggest, Jeff, in your opinion of representing We Are Change, what are accessible psychological support systems out there for?
Well, as a trigger warning for people that are viewing this program, there are organisations such as Lifeline and Kids Helpline that can assist people.
Jeff, can you tell me how justice could or should have been served in this case?
Well, the residents should have been thoroughly assessed for any trace of mould whatsoever. That place should have been livable.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Jeff. The stories that you bring are really important, and the work that you do. You three are exceptional people who are actively seeking change, and thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that for everyone out there that you can find hope and you can also find support from what you've heard from us today. I'm Janelle Da Silva. Thank you for joining us. This is the Injustice Series.